Greetings, brothers and sisters. Just a quick video today. I've had a sore throat. No reason to say anything. You don't have to say, I hope you feel better. In fact, be better if you didn't. But I've had a sore throat now on and off. And last night I had real trouble swallowing. Like my Adam's apple is like sore and whatever. So I'm just going to try to rest my voice today. But I just want to do a quick voiceover, and let's start here. This is like the one image I want to show here, but this is from 538.com, which is probably the best. I don't know how accurate polls are. Again, don't say anything about it. Don't, that polls are fake, or they could be, whatever. I don't care, right? But if you look at, this is Joe Biden, right? And he had, half of the country approval, and then about 40% disapproval. But now it's pretty much come in where, his disapproval rate and his approval rate are basically the same. And he has had a disastrous presidency, right? I mean, I don't know, how you could say Joe Biden is doing a good job, but there are some issues, specifically, I think, around COVID and maybe the economy and the fact that he's not Trump, will make this almost impossible for many people, probably, at least 40% of people, to ever root against Joe Biden or think he's bad. So much for the short video. I've ended up doing the voiceover, and it takes me a while even to introduce the central point, so I'm going to talk about it here, and then it's going to come back around sometime later in the voiceover. But it's this idea that one's emotional, if your emotional state, your happiness, whatever it is, right, how you feel, is based in changing other people's beliefs, then you're going to be miserable, especially as a truther, right? If saving the world is based in people getting it or waking up or whatever you want to call it, becoming aware, right, changing how they see things, being able to be objective and reasonable and accept information from people they fundamentally have a difference with and really are just looking for people like you to argue, you're going to be miserable because they don't want to change. Changing people doesn't happen unless people come looking for change, right? Unless people come looking to you or someone. There are times in life where people open up and they're a little freaked out, they're a little bit rattled, they're a little shook, and they, want to change. There's a window of opportunity there. Pressure's on, right? They're destabilized and they want to change, or some people just, hit rock bottom, or they're just not happy with who they are, and they, fundamentally are looking to change and change their beliefs or find out the information they didn't know before and learn. Most people don't want to learn. They get out of school and they stop learning. And, they're just looking for someone to argue with. Their belief systems are so rigid, they're just looking for someone to fight with. So I'm going to cover this more later on in the video, but that's the central point of this video, which I develop later on, and it just took a lot longer than I thought it was. I don't know, maybe I just need to not make videos. We'll see how my voice feels tomorrow anyway. But here's the rest of the voiceover. And you saw the same thing with Trump. And, the way that Trump went out, and none of you guys who are still Trumpers, the way that Trump went out in the end, specifically to do with his followers, that he invited up to Washington, D.C., and then he sent them down towards Pennsylvania Avenue in that speech in an aggressive manner where he told his followers to intimidate Congress. And, he fell right into that trap, because what happened after that on January 6th was a disaster for him. And, people in the truth community and everybody else, it was a big win for Biden and the media and the Democrats to demonize Trumpers and Cubies and, by association, the rest of us. And so if that wasn't bad enough, his stupidity there, and again, I'm not blaming him for the whole thing, I'm just saying he fell into the trap. And again, this isn't what this video is about, right? It's not about Biden, it's not about Trump, it's not about anything specific. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But what happened afterwards was he disavowed and blamed all the followers, and they turned on him and blamed him, right? And instead of, taking responsibility for getting played, he got completely worked on the whole election thing. And really his presidency. He didn't take responsibility for all of these left-wing things that happened, all this agenda that was pushed through. They changed the definition of gender, and they changed language, the way language is used. I mean, this whole social Hollywood agenda. What you had was, you have these miserable people that I cover all the time that are celebrities, people who are living the so-called dream. They're rich and famous celebrities, and they go to all the stuff that everyone wants to, all the parties, and they live around other famous people, and they have money and all these things, fans, and they're miserable. Like, they're miserable, wretched, self-centered, self-absorbed, big egotistical people that can't sustain relationships and just take and take, Madam Expiration Date, just, these spiritual vampires that feed on other people. And this goes for the modeling world and the big world, the big money world, big finance, people who are really, really wealthy, all these people, right? This whole Hollywood, rich people, social system and morality. And then they rolled it out for everybody, like, these are the most miserable people, the most low functioning people. And now kids are growing up with this orientation towards the world. Like, it's the worst group, it's the most failed group. If something is, shows that it's a failure, that it's a disappointment, that you work your whole life to be rich and famous and become a celebrity, or a rich person, or whatever it is, ultra wealthy, or a politician, anybody along this whole, this whole spectrum of rich, famous, powerful people. And then you see that you're miserable. They all are miserable. They know it, right? They know, wow, this thing didn't pan out like I thought it was, didn't solve my problems, and they're lonely, and all these things. Many of them are just, if they're not, they're self-destructive. If they don't, like, take their own lives, they do it by living poorly, right? Dying young, and, miserable, brokenhearted, whatever, because it didn't pan out, right? The dream, the thing that they thought was going to bring them success and happiness, didn't really do it, because it lacks backing in a connection with the soul and God, right? It's something where, there's a famous story, I've told it before. There's this two entities of, the aspects of Vishnu, the cosmic functionary of preservation. And he has Nara, which is his ego, his human side, and Narayana, his soul side. And they go and, on a spiritual level, and come down to earth and observe things. And Narayana teaches Nara about what's really going on, right? Nara asks his soul, what's happening here. And so they come down, and there's this emperor, and the emperor's praying for more, more, right? He's praying praying to God for more lands, more people, more subjects, all these things. And Narayana grants him his wish. And then they go out to, like, a rural area, and there's this saint, a higher developed spiritual being, and he has, like, just a cow. And he, milks a cow, and the cow's, he's living in some hut somewhere. And the cow gets sick, and he's praying to God to heal the cow, and Narayana kills the cow, right? The cow dies. And Nara's like, WTF, right? What are you doing here? This emperor, who's an evil man, is asking for more stuff, and you gave him what he asked for, right? You grant him his wishes, but he's, a horrible person. He's a bad emperor. And this other guy who's, a higher developed soul, a saint, has one thing, and you take it away from him. And Narayana goes, well, the emperor is not going to come back to God in this life or anytime soon. But he has to have the experience of being an emperor, of having material power, to realize, his soul has to realize, his subtle bodies, that this isn't the purpose of life, that it didn't make him happy. So he needs to, have all the things he wants, and then realize that it isn't the goal of life. and then, come back in his next life as a more mature person. Whereas this saint had one thing separating him from God, from complete dependence on God, and that's the cow. And now that the cow's dead, he can be 100% dependent on God and receive liberation from this world. And so sometimes people have to go through something as a learning experience. And being a celebrity, being a wealthy person, and having dissatisfaction, the soul realizes, okay, that's not why I'm here. And then it comes back and has a better, more mature existence the next life. But anyways, I want to get back to the main point here because I don't want to talk for very long. But what I was saying is that you have this culture, this morality that comes from Hollywood, and they've had it for years, and it's, it spans the spectrum of famous people, and it's made them miserable, and it's failed in their lives. And through social media and all the rest of it, right, during the Trump administration, they rolled out this Hollywood morality, and now the young people have it. The young people, most of them believe in this. There's some rebels, there's some people, some young people that don't, but for the most part, they believe in it and they understand it. Even if they don't believe in it, they know what it is and, have accepted it, whether they're on board with it or not. And so something that's failed at that level, in terms of, we know what happens to celebrities and these wealthy people, they die miserable, lonely deaths. Almost 100% of the time. And now you have all these young people who are indulging in these same sorts of beliefs, right? And, goals and intentions and things. And so that was rolled out under Trump. You had a conservative, he claimed to be a conservative, and you had all these people that thought Trump was going to save them, the QBs and the Trumpers, but the left just had a huge power grab. And that's not what this video is about. But I'm just saying this because a lot of this happened because people were rigid in their beliefs. And I find that in the truth community even more so. It's across the board, but there's so many people in the truth community with really rigid beliefs. And everybody thinking it's their job to change people's opinions. I was talking to my wife about this morning, and I was already thinking about it. Like it, came up just organically. And so I was already planning to make this video, but we were talking about it. And you go through stages, and I've talked about the stages. And in the initial stage, and people get locked into this and never leave, there's lots of truthers that are still putting out the same sort of videos with this idea of waking people up, waking everybody up. And that's, it wouldn't work, and it's not possible. Most people are so rigid in their belief systems, they're not going to change, right? And when you start thinking it's your job to wake everybody up, because so many of you think this, so many people in the truth community think this, you end up putting your emotional state in the hands of people that you don't like and don't respect and who are never going to listen to you. You think it's your obligation and duty to change their mind. And if you don't, disaster is going to happen. This is the Alex Jones model that was put out there, wake everybody up, information wars. And it's, just a false, it leads to bad things. I'm going to say this, I have to go back and edit it because I ended up talking a lot longer than I wanted to in the beginning. My emotional state, how I feel about the world, my orientation, my goals, all of it, right? Just, whether I'm happy or not, is not connected to, is not affected by whether or not I change people's minds or people agree with me, right? Or they listen to me or they take, what I have to say in terms of my point of view into consideration even. They consider it or not. I don't care. I've been through this for so long that's not, what other people do and what other people believe has nothing to do with me. One of the things it says in the Heartfulness system is that it's really hard to find a spiritual master of caliber, somebody who's a legitimate, higher developed soul. But it's even harder for that spiritual master to find a quality disciple, somebody to pass on their teachings. That's why there's so many saints and higher developed souls that never were able to create a movement that was sustainable where they could pass on what, they were doing to somebody else, and that same person would reach that level and even, sense go higher because of the collective work. And that's what the heartfulness system offers in terms of, these a succession of various higher developed souls because of the transmission and the cleaning, and this is being a plan. It's part of a plan. It's one of the wonderful things about the system. But it's hard to find people who are open and wanting to be changed, people who are looking to change, who are coming to this YouTube channel because they, don't feel great about things, and they're admitting they don't know. Like, they admit to themselves that they're, not sure, they don't know, and they're, looking for, some explanations, right? I mean, mostly they should be going to God and then, finding something like this here, this YouTube channel or whatever it is, this among many other various oracles, right? But most people who come here are already, filled up, right? Like, it's one of the reasons the heartfulness system has a cleaning aspect, because the transmission that's given in the heartfulness system, so if you don't know, you're not familiar with it, is that the heartfulness system features free transmission, which is God's love, divine love. And the master of the system can transmit, and there's these preceptors and trainers who are given this ability to be conduits for this divine energy to flow through them. And so you meditate and you face the person, and if you're with them in a physical, if you're with them in the same location, but you can also do it on the internet, right? And they transmit to your heart, and you absorb the transmission and meditate on it. But there's a cleaning aspect, and the second master of the system, Babaji, said that if you had a glass full of gasoline and you kept on pouring milk into it, the milk would just keep on getting ruined. No matter how much you diluted the gasoline, the cup itself has to be cleaned out or you can't drink it, right? It's going to have some levels of gasoline in it. So you just can't keep on pouring transmission into people and expecting them to absorb it. You have to clean them out, right? It has to be clean. And the people have to clean their hearts themselves and get rid of the rigidity and, all the crap that's in there that's not serving them, and replace it with this divine energy. But the transmission, can affect people's beliefs and how they go about, it changes the way that you perceive the world. It's helped me tremendously, but it doesn't always help people, in terms of their characters. In fact, it doesn't help people at all in terms of their characters unless they themselves ask for, help changing their characters or who they are or their belief systems, and a willingness to accept things that they don't want to hear. It doesn't help people on that level, but it's something that I deal with here, and you guys all deal with it as well, that people are so rigid about their beliefs. And I'm not talking about the beliefs themselves. I'm talking about, how open and flexible people are to hearing that they're wrong. I mean, this is something that I go through personally, right? Realizing, okay, I didn't see this correctly. Maybe I was 80% right or whatever it was. Being open to change your point of view. It's about your orientation to the world, not which category, demographic, or which box you check. Because most people come in full of themselves, full of their own beliefs, rigid in one capacity or another, and don't want to change. And so it's like, for me, I'm like, all right, great. Like, I'm betting on what I, believe, the system I use, the heartfulness meditation, following my heart, my interpretation of reality, the choices that I make. And, I'm living with the results, right? Like, everybody's betting now, especially now with COVID and, how much polarization there is. Everyone has to make their decisions and live with the results. Do your research, whatever way you go about it. Like, you have to develop a system and how to make decisions. My system is, the heart becomes a, intelligence center in the heartfulness system. And, after all the dust settles, it just, I don't know how to explain it, but there's just like the right decision. There's one decision just standing out there, and it's just a feeling, a heart-based feeling, not an emotional feeling, not a gut feeling, not based in anger or any of these things, fear or whatever. Just this, I can feel the loving energy coming from one direction, right? And whatever that is, and I'm like, oh, there it is. I can feel it, and I just, and I follow that, whatever it is, and I just live with the results. That's where my soul and God are pointing me, regardless of mentally what it is, regardless of, like what my belief system is. I'm like, all right, this is what I'm supposed to do. Like, for example, just a quick example, and this is going longer than I wanted it to. But there was, when I came back from India, my family and I came back from India, I didn't want to leave India. Like, it was the first time I had gone there a couple times before, and I never really liked it and was eager to come back to America. But then I just, something there, there was some awareness of past lives and just what I was going through and, all this stuff. My family just sort of getting broken up and the divorce and all these things and what I was going through in terms of cleaning and just these things. And I just loved India. Like, I just loved it, even with all the, negativity there, all the, the negative material aspects of India. And I just wanted to stay there, even though becoming a citizen there is really hard and impossible, and life is hard there. And, it's just, and there was a time when Master Charji, this third master of the system, was dying, and all these people from around the world came there to be with him during this period of time. He couldn't travel anymore. But after he passed away, Daji, who became the new master, said, everyone's got to go back home, right? We don't need everybody here, right? If you want to, help this, spread the energy and spread the, whatever it is, right? The transmission and the possibilities of the Heartfulness system, you have to go out and be out in the world in other places. We all can't be in one, ashram, and so, which is, of course, the right attitude, what needed to happen. And so even with that, I kind of wanted to stay in India. But after I left, I was like, I don't think I ever want to go back. Like, it's just, I just, it was such on a material level, it just was such an ass kicking. And, I just, I didn't have any desire to go back. Like, it just was like you get an aversion to something. Like, you'd get drunk on, a certain alcohol, vodka, tequila or something. And then you smell that alcohol and you want no part of it ever again, right? You get really sick or something. You create an aversion, like in Clockwork Orange, they had that aversion. If you ever seen that movie, but they, there was this psychological method to make people nauseous. It'd give them something that would make them really nauseous and feel bad, and then show them images of things that you wanted them to be have an aversion to. And they would associate that really unpleasant feeling of nausea from the, drugs you were given with the images they were seeing, and they would build up an aversion to criminal behavior or whatever, psychological deviance or something. One of the clients that I had in my last job at my last treatment center had gone through aversion therapy. He said it was freaking horrible, right? And people are actually doing electroshock therapy. Some of the crazy things people have come up with that have, basically torturing people. So anyways, there was this big gathering of 2019, the beginning of 2020. And it was this, I guess, was it the 75th anniversary of the first master of the system's birthday, and it was the inauguration of the new ashram in Hyderabad that can seat like over 100,000 people in the meditation hall. And I'd been there for them building it. I'd been there when there was nothing on it, but it was just a piece of land, and seeing they've turned it into a slice of heaven, right? And so even though I didn't want to go to India, it just felt in my heart, we got to go. We need to go to this thing. I talked to my wife. She was into it, right? She had just started the Heartfulness system. It was an opportunity for her to go to the ashram and really experience it. My kids had been to India, with me. And so it was, this opportunity, and I just felt in my heart it needed to happen. Even though some part of me just didn't want to go back. Like, I just, I if it was up to me, I would have said no, but my heart was like, you got to go. There's just, you have to go to this thing. And we went, and, it was a more of a cleaning gathering. Like, some gatherings are really, you leave just completely blissed out, but this was more of a cleaning gathering. And of course we left, and COVID was just coming out. So when we got there was all these people coming in from Hong Kong, and they were wearing masks, and they were quarantined, and at the airport in India, and it was stressful. And my kids were telling me there's this thing, they saw it on the news, this COVID, it's Corona. It was called Corona then, right? And I didn't know anything about it. And then we got to the ashram, and we were coming home, and then we came home in the middle of February, I think, or February something, like 10th or something. And Corona had just swept across, was starting to sweep across the world, right? It happened in March and April. And before you know it, everything was closed down. And so the chances of me going back to India, my family going to India, I don't know, right? Years away. But something in my heart, got over my aversion to going back to India. And it was this, window of opportunity that's now closed. And in India, they're very worried about diseases, much more so. I was sick there quite a bit. It's, hot there all the time, and all these things I've talked about. And so the chance of these ashrams being open and being enjoyable to be there, and the long travel, like it's a 2-day flight, right? It takes sometimes like 36 hours to get there, and it's grueling, And so, it's something where these opportunities, even the ashrams in America here aren't open. I don't think they'll be open soon. And so that's an example of, I don't know, as best as I can give about following one's heart in the way the the system teaches you, even though in my mind and my ego and my, personality, I was a solid no about going back to India. I'm like, maybe in a couple years, but then just something opened up, and I'm like, I just felt it, right? And my attitude changed about it, and it ended up happening, and it needed to happen for so many different reasons. But I've gotten off track here. I want to make like a 10-minute video, so I'm talking. My voice is starting to. I just want to wrap this thing up, and so I just can't make a short freaking video anymore. But as I was saying to my wife, if you look at the people who are what we consider sheeple, they are scared right now because of the world collapsing around them, and like everyone else. And their solution, what they're following, their system, is to depend on the powers that be, to believe the media, to believe the government, to believe Joe Biden or whatever it is, to believe, institutions, doctors, medical science, whatever it might be, right? Depending on your point of view. But they are trusting in what we call America, even if they don't agree with some people or some, threads. They trust the overall system, what I call the beast. And they've been told that conspiracy theorists and people who are, against certain protocols that are going around are threatening them, threaten their way of life, right? And you can see it if you click into any of these people's, where they post their beliefs, that, they've demonized all of us in their minds. And they're going to believe the facts, confirmation bias, but also, looking to find things that work with their deception and their personal deception. And you can just see it, right? They're completely closed to anything you say. As soon as they identify you, as the profile that's being created by the government, by the media about you, and you have family members like this, and we all have people in our lives like this, and they're closed to whatever you're saying. And the more you say it, the more closed they get, the more contentious it gets, and the more rigid they get about their beliefs. And they're getting their facts from the beast of the system. You're getting your facts from what they consider conspiracy theorists and, bad people, right, that aren't backed by the fact checkers, and they're not backed by the authority. All these people, Chris Cuomo's or any of these people at CNN, and all these people say, this is what the authority says. This is what your government says. This is what the media says. This is what your president says. This is what the experts are saying. This is the truth. This is the authority. We're the ones who decide. We're the arbiters of truth. We're the fact checkers. We tell you, when they fact check you against what the scientists are saying or what whatever it is saying, right? And so, they're warped, what we consider their warped reality and their deception is, the facts, right? They have the authority on their side. So you say, all right, well, the people in the truth community must be much better than them, and you're not, right? The majority of people in the truth community come in with a rigid set of beliefs, whether it's, something to do with their religion or something to do with their political beliefs or whatever it might be, being a Republican or a Christian or whatever it is. And they come in with these preconceived ideas, and they're not interested in those ideas being changed. And so when you say something that they don't agree with, then they put you in a category or whatever it is, right? When people, for example, oh, you do the heartfulness meditation, that's some sort of new age cult. You just heard about it from me 2 seconds ago. Yeah, but I know more about it than you do. It's like all these other things I've heard about. Well, it's nothing like those things. Well, you don't know. Yeah, well, I've been doing it for 30 years. Right? Oh, yeah, well, I know more because you're deceived. Okay, whatever, right? See ya. So that's the truth community. And, the heartfulness system for me is just the most wonderful thing, right? Just in terms of the system itself, the transmission and the cleaning and, what it's helped me achieve, what it's helped me, become and continue to change and become and get closer to God and all the things that it's delivered, right? But in terms of the people that do it, I have as much frustration or more. I mean, again, when I get frustrated, which I don't anymore, but I went through this. This is part of my learning process that, the people in the system, that doesn't mean they're going to come up with the right answers. In fact, many of them, even on the highest level, end up coming up with the wrong answers. And so, it isn't about beliefs, right? It's about whether you're evolving or not. And your beliefs, you have to be open to your beliefs changing. You have to be open to being wrong. And many people aren't, whether they do the heartfulness system or not. It doesn't prevent you from being an asshole, or it doesn't prevent you from being fearful. There's so many people in the heartfulness system that are still practicing their religion, which in their case is Hinduism, even though they've been told over and over again they have to accept that this is something new. It's not an extension of Hinduism, even though it came out of India. But they're still doing their rituals, and they don't read the heartfulness literature. I mean, I saw this when these Whispers of the Brighter World books were put out. And the first book came with these prophecies that for me, I had, known some of these things. And I mean, I was becoming aware of the big event in 2000, by 2005, I knew, it was clear to me that we were being lied to by the government, things like this. And my brother had been, a truther in his way. So I had it in my DNA. My brother was an AM radio host for some of these things, right? Talked about the Federal Reserve. I mean, there was a group of people out there, a fringe group, that either had like newsletters, underground newsletters or things like that, or AM radio stations, AM radio shows. And a lot of this came from Vietnam vets who just knew that they'd been lied to by the government and all these things, and were mistreated when they came home. And so there was this movement out there, and my brother told me some of these things in college, and I was open to it. I said when I was a little kid, I had to do a report on the Civil War, and I went to the library, and I was always a big library person when I was a kid. And I found this book, and it said the Civil War wasn't about slavery, it was about economics. So it was my first alternative, it was like an official book, right? It wasn't a conspiracy theory. This was somebody who was stating the facts of the real reasons behind the Civil War. They, now historically, Abraham Lincoln wanted to free the slaves, but Abraham Lincoln was, racist. He said very negative things about black people and slaves, and he thought that they were inferior. You can I'll look up the quotes, right? And so that was my first, I did a report about it. It was an alternative narrative to the mainstream narrative. So I always had this kind of, whatever it was in my personality, being dyslexic, not fitting in, not really understanding the American culture. And so when I read these prophecies that were, some of them, one of the big events, there's all these things that talks about upheavals. And one of them is supposed to be coming in 2025 or 2026. It was given in, I believe, in 2001. And Babaji said something about, the first big upheaval will come in 25 years. wasn't specific about what it was. He talked about the poles reversing. He talked about how atom, ATOM, the atom will ruin this world. So there was going to be some nuclear problems, right? Nuclear war, or, the nuclear power plants, whatever it was. Some other things, specific things. But he didn't say which thing was going to happen in 2025 or 26 or whatever it was. But it's coming, right? It's something that people who believe in the Heartfulness system, and you have a lot of people who are very devoted, and it's their number one thing. People who I know have given lots of money. They work tirelessly for the Heartfulness Sajmarg mission. I mean, they're really into it. And so when I read these prophecies, I'm like, oh, we should probably, when you know the future, you know the way things are going to go. And there was a book from Babaji that was published in 1956 where he talked about how a future world was going to be built on the world that we now consider, the bones and ashes of the world we now consider, right? There's going to be substantial paradigm shift. And there's some details in that, right? Like there's, one of the islands might be England was going to fall into the sea. I mean, you can read it in the back of Reality at Dawn. It's available on the internet, and you can read a PDF form on, you can find it, right? It's out there, and you can buy the book and whatever. But in terms of, it wasn't just that he was predicting these things, but he was instructed to make them happen. Like there was, he was instructed when in his lifetime to, on a spiritual level, make these material events happen. There was the spiritual work that was being done. And he did these things, all the way to the end of the universe when the Mahaparala is supposed to happen, when the universe implodes on itself. And so, there's that aspect as well. Like that's how much it's a part of the Heartfulness system. And so when these prophecies came out, I thought people would be on board with it, people who do the practice. My family and I was now just beginning our first homestead, my first marriage and things like this. And I thought there would be people who were into it, supported and back it, but it was just the opposite. Very critical, people telling me, you're doing it wrong, right? I was shocked at the reaction. And then I asked them about, not just the prophecies, but, electromagnetic pollution. They were talking about Wi-Fi. Babaji was talking about Wi-Fi and these prophecies and things. And they were just closed to all of it, right? They just had a block. And, and me doing it, my family doing this was somehow a threat to them in one way or another. They wanted to close it down. They didn't want it to exist, right? Very critical. People came up to me and blasted me. I mean, this one guy came up and he asked me, about it, and I told him, and I was, thinking he was digging it, and then he had this criticism of me. This guy I barely knew, right? And years later, I saw him at the ashram. He said, "Oh, I've been listening to your YouTube videos, and they're really good." And I'm like, well, he's at least changed his opinion about this, But even now, I mean, Daji in a recent talk said in 5 years this first event is supposed to happen, right? And we got 5 years to bring new people in, and right after that, there's been some issues with the ashram. I was talking to my brother, who's a caretaker there, and it could be a time where people would come together and develop. I don't know. I don't want to get into that right now, but it's just something where, even now when it's in this quickening phase and the world's falling apart, people are not embracing these teachings that are there for them, right? To evaluate and to adopt in terms of planning for their future and the future of their children. And so what I'm saying here is, I've experienced this, and even when I worked as a counselor, and when I worked as a therapist and a counselor, I took a break, and my wife and I were finishing a project outside, a couple projects. The weather's been great. My energy level's been good. My sore throat seems to be some sort of weird anomaly. But anyways, I've experienced this as a counselor, just as a human being throughout my life, and then certainly here in the Truth community, and even before that in the Heartfulness organization. And what I've come to realize, especially now as things are going south quickly, that if the future of the world, saving the world, is contingent upon,
getting people to see what needs to be seen, or changing them, or waking them up, or whatever it might be, shifting their beliefs, then the world's effed, right? There's no chance. I mean, at least right now, because it's just the opposite is the case. See, it'd be different if people were starving or really scared or whatever it might be. We're under more dire circumstances, but everybody's so well fed and, has so much. I mean, America, everyone has so much. Even on a global basis, people are doing much better than, in past eras. And, when people are not worried about the fundamental needs, they get into belief system wars. And you see that, right, where people will never acknowledge you were right. Like, even if it's proven, no matter what kind of, so-called facts or information you give them or theories you give them, they just want to argue with you. They'll always find a way to make you wrong. They'll, find a way that your sources aren't legitimate or your reasoning isn't legitimate. I mean, they're just never going to see the light. And that's just, that's with the idea that somehow you're more knowledgeable and more aware than they are. Like, that's, there's sort of almost like an arrogance there as well, that your point of view is the right one. But it's so polarized, people just want to see the other side suffer, and they would never acknowledge or admit that the other person is right. And so people just want to argue with you. I saw this early on. There was a guy I knew who did the Heartfulness meditation I, sort of acquainted with, and we were friends on Facebook, and he tagged me in a post and a bunch of other people, and he wanted to know my opinion about, or all of our opinions about something. And, I didn't really want to spend time writing something. It's like a page long. My answer would have been like a page, it's like a page or two long, right? And I knew this person was sort of on the sheeple side of things, a liberal person. But I thought he asked me because he knew my alternative view and was interested in it. But at the end, he got everybody's opinion, and then he wrote something completely different. I mean, I didn't read everybody's thing, but I could tell that he wasn't really asking people for their opinion. He just wanted everyone to read his, right? Like, he was asking everybody's opinion so that he could give his at the end of it, right? And he'd have the sort of the final word. And I'm like, well, I'm never doing that again. It's just a waste of my time. Everybody wants everyone else to listen to what they have to say, and they want other people's beliefs to align with theirs. And, even in the truth community, wherever you are in the truth community, like the people who are, have gone a lot farther into the sort of crazy abyss of the truth community, they're all nuts and crazy. The people who aren't quite as awake as you are sheeple, but, you're right where everyone else should be. I mean, that's how everybody views it. And so there's no changing. Very few people come with any sort of sense of change. There's another thing that happened to me, I don't know, a couple of days ago, and one of the viewers wrote me a Facebook message asking me to explain why I'm a round earther. And the person said they're an ardent flat earther, and I'm like, I'm not answering. I'm not falling for that again. When you're not going to change somebody's point of view and they're just looking to argue with you, right? They're just looking to tell you that you're wrong. And I've been through that with so many different, these fringe or these different branches of the truth community. They're not looking to change their opinion. So why do I want to talk to you? Like, I'm all set. Like, I am confident in my reasoning ability and my decision-making ability. I'm confident where I am. I believe I've made the right decisions, especially about the big things, for years. And I'm on the path, my spiritual path. I'm confident about the heartfulness system and all these things. But part of this heartfulness system is changing and adapting. But I don't really give a crap about beliefs. Like, I just don't care anymore. It's like beliefs are just nothing. The system's going to collapse and everyone's going to have to scramble. And what you believe in isn't important. I mean, in terms of your relationship with God and doing the heartfulness system, I believe that's something that you can carry on throughout the, next phase. But no one's going to care about Joe Biden in, 5 years or whatever it is, right? When things start to go south, no one's going to care about Trump. No one's going to care about COVID. No one's going to care about, any number of these things that people get obsessed with because, you'll just be thinking about how to survive or whatever else, right? As things start to go south in a way that is much more intense than it is now. And when your needs aren't being met, when there's no gas or electricity, or there's shortages of everything and people are starving and panicked, and you start to see the world change in a way that you've never experienced before, especially for Americans, and whatever else might be happening, right, in terms of global catastrophes and upheavals or whatever you want to call them. And so when these things happen, your priorities will change really quickly. All of ours priorities will. And if people can't come together and work together in a community, putting your differences behind, politics isn't going to matter. Your demographic isn't going to matter. People are going to have to work together and share labor and sacrifice for each other and build a old-fashioned community. But if your beliefs are more important than your survival, then you're marked for extinction. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Baramano. Definitely reporting for the Apocalypse. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.